Hello, it's Karen Burniston here with my monthly designer challenge video. The theme this month is spinners, and so we were all challenged to use any of our dies that create a spinning motion for a card of any theme. I decided to triple our spinner square pop-up. I started with a piece of cardstock 5 inches wide by 12 inches long and scored in the center for folding. And then to that I added paper panels that were each 4 3/4 by 5 3/4. The spinner square die set includes squares, including a nice big 3-inch square. However, I needed to go even larger. So I went with our squares crosshatch die set and made 3 sets of layered squares. So if we say the largest die in the set is an A, I've made an AB, a CD, and a DE. Okay, turning to my spinner square pop-up die set, I've cut the mechanism 3 times out of just a medium smooth cardstock. And then I also cut the rectangle out of the set out of the same color red. That's for my first spinner. To make it a little easier for you to see how to fold this piece on the video, I went ahead and sketched in the score lines with a pencil. Turning the piece so the tapered tab is up, I'm going to work the straight lines as folds to the back, so mountain folds. So 1, 2, 3 folds. And that's going to create the lower box of the pop-up. And then out here on the left, there's also 3 straight folds that create a box. So 1, 2, 3. And then there's this little small line that if you pivot that one, that's a valley fold, but it brings that box up. So when it sits next to the other one, it's a little bit taller. And then here for the spinner, what I need to do is I need to fold between the triangles. Then I can put my thumbnail into the triangles and work that fold back and forth. Then I press on the fold in the middle of the triangles and get it to collapse into the piece. Okay. And then what I want to do is add some adhesive just in the triangle below the perforation. So just that right triangle only. Then I fold the square over and into that adhesive. And the square is split so that the side that's attached to the adhesive will actually fold into the triangles as they spin, but then the rest of the square will be outside. Then I repeated that exact same process for my next spinner. So these two are going to be our spinners number 1 and 3. And then for number 2, I'm going to reverse the fold so that it spins the opposite direction. So step 1 with my reversed spinner is actually just to find the folds in the usual manner. And that's just because it's a lot easier to see the folds if you're looking at the side that the die has pressed into. So step 1 doesn't look any different than the other 2 spinners. I'm just going around and finding all of those folds, folding most of them to the back to make the boxes. And then I've got that one little small fold that pivots the left box up. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this piece around and just start reversing those folds. So the taper tab is going to go to the back. The one in between the triangles is going to go to the back. And then the ones for the boxes are going to go the opposite way. Okay, so you can see I've just made a mirror image of my original spinner. And then the folding of the spinner is exactly the same. It's just in reverse. So I press the triangles to fold into the piece. I add my adhesive to the side underneath the perforation. I fold that down into the exposed adhesive. It's split so that as the triangle folds in, there's a piece of the square that goes with it, and then the rest of the square stays to the outside. And now I've essentially made a completely mirror image spinner to the other 2, just by reversing the folds. And I'm going to label this one as my number 2 spinner. Time to add the number 1 spinner to the card. So if I open it up and put the largest square set just placed in the card so that I can put the square set centered. Then I'm going to grab my number 1 spinner set and make sure it's in the closed position. You can tell it's in the closed position because if it's not, the 2 ends will not line up. But then if you engage those 2 little folds, you'll see that the bottom tabs line up next to each other. And that allows you to glue those 2 tabs so that the ends of them butt up to the fold of the card. So we're going to flip it over, put it face down. I'm going to look to the right side and make sure that it looks like I'm slid over enough that the square set is going to cover the mechanism. And then I'll just mark that with a pencil. And that way I can remove the mechanism, add my strong adhesive to those 2 tabs. And you'll see the 2 tabs are different sizes. So by looking at my glue, you can see that you will kind of have a little stair step of glue there. And then I'm just going to make sure they stay side by side, butted right up to the fold of the card. Sometimes it's easier to lift the card up to make sure that you don't cross the fold, but you're butted right up to the fold. Now, if this seems a little fast for you because maybe you're new to this die set, there are assembly videos and tip videos on this die set. So just go to our website, KarenBurniston.com, put in the spinner square into the search box. The product page will come up and you'll find those videos there. So holding the mechanism into the flat position, I'm going to now add my glue to the two small tabs that are visible. So I've got the tapered tab and the little tiny tab, and then I need to keep this nice and flat. I can see this bottom one looks slightly crooked, but it should be okay. And then I just need to close the card and press against the exposed adhesive. And those tabs are small, so you definitely want to give this time to set up and just let it open a little bit and make sure that that little small tab in there is actually attached to the back. And then just go real slow until it's set up to where you can operate the card without it popping back off of there. Now to add the rectangle, I just want to use the adhesive on 3 quadrants of the square. So not the quadrant that dives into the triangle, just the other 3 that are towards the outside. And then that rectangle is sized to fit that corner of the square just perfectly. And then it should be placed so that it's up when the card is open, and then it'll slide down as the card closes. We have a die set called Street Lantern Pop-Up, and the pole in that is going to be just perfect to suspend the banners. So I've got a shiny metallic gold cardstock. I've added score tape to the back. And the piece only has to be big enough to cover the pole section, since I'm not going to be using the little extender arms in my card. And that will just save me a little bit of shiny gold cardstock as well as a little bit of score tape. I've also cut that same pole out of a heavyweight black cardstock. So I'm going to trim off those side arms off both the black and the gold one. And then since the gold one is a sticker, I'm going to line it up with the bottom edge just perfectly. And as I stick those pieces together, I want to keep them unattached at the top so that I can slide in my twine for the banners and just use the adhesive that's on the gold pole to basically hold that in place. So just sandwiching it between the layers. Now, it was not until later when I put the second spinner on that I realized I would have rather had that twine be up a little higher on that pole. So if you're crafting along with me, just put it up higher right now. I grabbed the banners out of our Slim Flaps and Frames die set. I liked those ones because they were fold over banners, so I didn't have to string them onto the twine, but rather could just cut them, fold them over the top of the twine, and then glue them to themselves. So that seemed to be a really nice banner for this application. But if you have one of the other die sets that has a different banner, just use that instead. Now the glue I'm using is my LINECO Neutral pH adhesive in my fine tip bottle. And we do sell both of those items on our website. That is my very, very favorite. And then I just keep the tip in a damp paper towel in a jar so that it stays flowing throughout my crafting. Okay, before I add my pole, I'm going to go ahead and add the square set to that lower box of the pop-up. So I'm just going to put it face down in front of that box. That's the box where I wrote the number 1. And I'm just going to add my adhesive all over the front face of that box. And then making sure that my big square set is centered, I'm just going to hold it in place while I close the card. That adhesive that's on the box is going to pick that square set up, and then it will pop up like this as the card opens. I am a big fan of testing items on spinners for placement, so I'm going to use a tape runner at the base of my pole, attach it to that rectangle, the spinning rectangle that's behind there, and then just carefully close the card and see if the end of the pole sticks out, which it does. That's why I like a more temporary adhesive, because then I have the option to move it. So I lower it, and then close the card again and check, and now it is staying within the card limit. So that's a good spot. I do want to make that permanent, so I'll go in there with my glue and add a little glue behind the pole. For my other pole, I just kept the backing sheet between the two poles at the top so that they wouldn't stick together yet. And I don't need the entire pole. I can definitely chop off most of it, because for this one, I'm going to just glue it to the back of the square so that it is sticking out on the left side to hold the other end of the banners, but that one is not going to move. So that one's going to be a stationary pole, and I can just slide the twine in and give it a check before I make that permanent, and just make sure that I like how high up, the banners are coming. like I alluded to earlier when I was constructing this card, at this point, the banners seemed plenty high because I could see them, you know, when the card was open. However, later on, when I add the happy birthday to my second spinner, I realized that I would like to have those a little higher. So if you're crafting along with me, I would just put the top of the twine up in the little round section at the top of the pole. Okay, time to add my second spinner. So that's the number 2 one. For this one, I'm going to have the medium square set, so I'm just going to prop that up to kind of get the general location of it. That will help me set the spinner down where the square is going to cover it. So once again, I'll just add a little pencil line just to make sure that I remember where to put it. And then I'm going to add the adhesive all over those 2 large tabs. And I do have that in the flat closed position so that the ends of those tabs line up and that they can be butted right up to the large square set. So we're basically treating the base of the large square as our new card fold. So we're going to build this spinner up against the edge of the large square set in the usual manner, and that's going to act as the fold that animates the spinner. Now I can add my adhesive to the 2 small tabs. So this is just normal assembly. We just happen to have this particular spinner reversed as far as which way it spins. But other than that, it's the identical same assembly, which is you just keep everything nice and flat, close the card against the exposed adhesive. Once again, I have to be a little patient because those tabs are small, and the first time I open it, if I haven't given a chance for the glue to set up, it'll probably pop the tabs off instead of spinning the square. But after a little time and some care, I will be able to then open the card, and that second spinner will stay in place and be working. Okay, for this one, I'm going to add a pink rectangle. So exactly like I did with the first one, I need to put my adhesive on the 3 quadrants of the square that do not dive down into, the mechanism. So just the 3 outside ones. That lower left corner this time is the one that's going to line up because this has been reversed. And then it'll be in the up position when the card is open, and it'll dive down as the card closes. Okay, and then I can add my medium square set to the lower box. Now for this one, I'm going to lay it down face down in front of that lower box and add my adhesive to the box, so just like I did with the first one. But on the medium square, I'm centering it in the card. I'm not centering it on the mechanism, if that makes sense. So the mechanism ends up being a little bit skewed to the left on this one, but the squares themselves end up still centered with the card. So to this spinner, I thought it would be cool to add the happy birthday, and we do have a shadow die that fits that as well. So I've used the happy birthday plus the happy birthday shadow, layered them together. And then what I'm going to do is figure out where I want this to be when the card is open, and I can see a little bit of the rectangle peeking through the words. So what I want to do is just trim off a little bit of that rectangle so that I basically have a flat edge there that I can hide behind the word birthday. And then you won't see the mechanism when the card is open. So I'm going to add my adhesive to that trimmed rectangle and then just go in there and get it behind the word birthday. And I'm just going to place mine kind of centered and somewhat straight, and then just check it and see if it stays in the card, which it did. So I was close, but I hit it well on the first try. First 2 spinners are working great, and now it's time to add the third one. So once again, I just add my adhesive to my large tabs. I'm going to go face down. I'm going to skew to the right this time because this one's spinning the same way as the pole at the back. So I like to have it a little bit more to the right so that the item has room in the card in the closed position. Once I have the base tabs down, then I add my adhesive to my small tabs. So doing exactly what we've done on the other 2. Close the card against the exposed adhesive and give it a little time to set up. And then I carefully open it and make sure that it doesn't pop off of there. Okay, 3 spinners working. Instead of putting a rectangle on this spinner square, I'm actually going to use the smallest square in the set, in the spinner square set. And I am going to choose an angle that's pleasing when the card is open. So I'm sort of ignoring the corners of the spinner square itself and instead just adding my square at a good display angle and just check it that it stays in the card. Now I do have that little corner sticking out right there, and I think I'll trim that off, and that way when I add my square set, I won't have that little corner sticking out visible. But then as far as adding the square set, it's just the same thing. I just lay it down in front of the mechanism, add my adhesive to that lower box. Once again, I am centering my square in the card, not against the mechanism. So wherever the square hits it on the back is fine, but we want it to look all centered in the final card. Okay, one more die in today's card, and that is our big birthday charms. For this one, I've assembled a present, and I did trim off the charm hole at the top since I'm using it as a standalone element. Just checking that it stays in the card, I've added that to my final spinner. Now here's where I adjusted the height of the banners. I just pulled the twine up so that it was closer to the top of the pole, and then that raised the banners up to where I could see them easier when the card was open. So if you're using Happy Birthday on your second spinner, then you may want to put those banners as high up as possible. There are some fun layering squares that come included in the spinner square set. So I've made a frame by nesting 2 together, then put the square in the center, and then out of those big birthday charms, I've assembled the cake slice, and that will fit just perfectly there. And then there is that streamer that comes in the big birthday charms. And then some rectangles out of the slim flaps and frames as a place to write a personal greeting. My favorite way to design card fronts for pop-up cards, especially knowing that they're going to be displayed open, is just a simple lead-in. So just leftover pattern paper and some layered slim flaps and frames with the banners and a streamer. Okay, to mail this card, your best envelope size would be an A7, which fits a 5x7 card. So this is a 5x6 card, so you'll have a little bit of room in the envelope lengthwise, but it will fit in there just perfectly for mailing. And I mean, imagine how fun for the recipient to open that card and have that triple spinner bringing up some items. It's a very generic technique, so you can absolutely use this for other themes with other items on the spinners. Pretty easy to put together. It doesn't take too long. And just a really fun motion card. If you are watching this video on YouTube or social media, I do invite you to follow the link in the description box over to my blog post. And that's where you will find photos and supply lists for my card, as well as links to all of the wonderful spinner inspiration by our very talented international design team. Thanks for watching. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBerniston.com, where you can purchase these dies as well as find links to our other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.